Emma, pregnant and alone, never imagined a small misstep would lead to such profound consequences. The relentless mental torture by her mother-in-law turned her world into an unbearable maze of misery and despair. Emma, a 5-year-old sweetheart, was her parents' cherished child, living under her grandmother's loving care. Her days were filled with laughter and the warmth of familial love, painting her early years with the colors of joy and innocence in her grandmother's nurturing embrace. Little Emma sat cross-legged on the faded rug, her curious eyes fixed on her grandmother. The room, filled with the gentle glow of the afternoon sun, seemed to hold its breath as the older woman spoke. "Emma, my dear, you were born on a night when the stars were shining just for you." Her grandmother began her voice a soft melody. "Your parents, oh, they loved you so. They were kind and gentle souls." Emma, clutching her favorite doll, leaned closer. "Where are they now, Grandma?" Her grandmother's eyes, deep pools of wisdom and sorrow, gazed out the window. "They're among the stars now, my love. A terrible storm took them away from us when you were just a baby. Will they ever come back?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper, tinged with hope and the innocence of her 6 years. Her grandmother took her small hand, a touch as delicate as a butterfly's wing. "They live in your heart, Emma, and in the stories I tell you, that's how we keep them close." Emma's grandmother told her tales of her parents' kindness and love as the day turned evening. Each story was a thread weaving a drapery of memory and passion, a legacy of her parents' lives. But as night fell, the room grew quieter, and Emma's grandmother's voice faded into silence. When Emma woke the following day, her grandmother was gone, joining the stars and leaving Emma with a heart full of stories and a future of uncertainty. Before we delve into Emma's story, please support us by hitting the like and subscribe button. Your subscription allows us to share more stories like hers. Now, let's step into the world of Emma. After her grandmother's passing, it was Mrs. Jenkins, the kindly neighbor, who took trembling 6-year-old Emma to the local orphanage. The building loomed large and imposing, its walls echoing with distant laughter and footsteps. Emma's small hand clutched Mrs. Jenkins as they walked through the halls, a mix of fear and curiosity in her young eyes. Life at the orphanage was a mixture of highs and lows. The matron, Mrs. Carter, was strict but fair, her stern demeanor often melting into rare smiles during evening story times. Emma found solace in books, their stories becoming her escape, a window to worlds far beyond the orphanage walls. Her days settled into a routine, morning chores, classes with other children, and free time that she often spent in the orphanage's modest library. Emma's love for reading blossomed, her imagination fueling dreams of a future filled with adventure and hope. Yet, challenges were plenty. Emma often felt the sting of loneliness, the absence of a family leaving a void no amount of camaraderie could fill. She struggled to fit in, her quiet demeanor and love for books making her an easy target for bullies. But Emma's resilience grew with each hardship, her spirit undaunted. Emma took on more responsibilities as she grew older, helping the younger children with their lessons and chores. She became a role model, her patience and understanding a comfort to those younger than her. Her academic prowess did not go unnoticed. With encouragement from the orphanage's teachers, Emma excelled in her studies, her determination fueled by a desire to achieve a better future. When the time came, she applied for universities, her heart set on continuing her education. The day Emma received her university acceptance letter was one of mixed emotions. Joy at the prospect of a new beginning was tinged with sadness at leaving behind the only home she'd known for years. Packing her few belongings, Emma bid farewell to the orphanage. The memories of her time there, both bitter and sweet, were etched into her heart. She was ready for the next chapter of her life in a new city, carrying the lessons and strength she had gained in the orphanage. As the bus pulled away, Emma looked back one last time. The orphanage, once a symbol of her loss and limitations, had become a crucible of her growth and resilience. Ahead lay the unknown, but Emma was no longer a frightened child. She was a young woman with dreams and the courage to pursue them. Emma's arrival at the university began a new era in her life. The sprawling campus was a far cry from the confined walls of the orphanage, brimming with opportunities and challenges. Initially overwhelmed, Emma soon found her footing, her years at the orphanage having instilled resilience and independence that now served her well. She rented a small apartment from Mrs. Langley, a 50-year-old widow known for her strict rules and no-nonsense attitude to support herself. Mrs. Langley had been alone since her husband's passing and had never had children. She first scrutinized Emma's every move, imposing strict curfews and house rules. Emma was accustomed to a disciplined life, complied without complaint, focused on her studies, and adjusted to university life. Despite her academic commitments, Emma knew she needed a job to support herself. She found one at a quaint, cozy local bookshop that smelled of old pages and coffee. It was the perfect refuge for someone who had grown up finding solace in stories. While tidying the shelves one afternoon, Emma found a wallet left behind. Inside was a visiting card belonging to Michael, a young man she vaguely remembered from the university. She called the number on the card, and they arranged to meet so she could return the wallet. Their first meeting was brief but left an impression. Grateful for her honesty, Michael started a conversation about books, discovering their shared passion. Over time, their casual meetings in the bookshop turned into coffee dates, and gradually, a deep connection formed. Michael found his way into Emma's guarded heart with his easy smile and thoughtful demeanor. Meanwhile, Mrs. Langley's demeanor towards Emma began to soften at the apartment. Perhaps it was Emma's disciplined nature or her quiet resilience that resonated with the older woman. The strict curfews became more relaxed, and their interactions grew warmer. Emma often found Mrs. Langley waiting for her, offering a cup of tea and a listening ear. Their relationship evolved from mere tenant and landlord to something akin to family, a bond Emma cherished deeply. As Emma and Michael's relationship flourished, she confided in Mrs. Langley, who, to Emma's surprise, offered her wisdom and support. It was a comforting change from the loneliness that had often shadowed Emma's life. Charmed by Emma's strength and simplicity, Michael fell in love with her. He admired her dedication to her studies and job, her passion for literature, and gracefully carrying her past. Emma, too, found herself drawn to Michael's kindness and the sense of peace she felt in his presence. Their relationship was a gentle journey of understanding and acceptance. Michael became a part of Emma's small world, often visiting the bookshop to see her or spending evenings together in quiet conversation. For Emma, these moments were a revelation, a glimpse into a life she had only read about in books but never dared to dream for herself. As Emma's first year at the university ended, she reflected on the changes in her life. The scared, lonely girl who had arrived in the city was now a confident young woman surrounded by people who cared for her. She had found a home in Mrs. Langley's apartment, a kindred spirit in Michael, and a sense of belonging that had long eluded her. Her journey was far from over, but as she stood on the brink of new beginnings, Emma felt profound gratitude for the unexpected turns her life had taken. In the pages of her story, adversity intertwined with kindness, leading her to a place where she felt valued and loved. Emma and Michael's journey to matrimony began with the quiet blooming of their love at the university. Their relationship, nurtured by shared interests and a deep understanding of each other, grew stronger daily. Michael was drawn to Emma's resilience and ability to find hope despite her challenging past. Emma, in turn, found comfort in Michael's kindness and the sense of stability he brought into her life. As their final year at the university approached, Talks of the future began to weave into their conversations. Michael, who had seen Emma's strength and independence, knew he wanted to build a life with her. He proposed one evening in the very bookshop where they had first met, surrounded by the stories that had brought them together. It was a simple yet heartfelt proposal, emblematic of their relationship. Emma, moved by the sincerity in Michael's eyes, accepted. However, the moment's joy was soon tempered by the reality of Michael's family dynamics. He had spoken to Emma about his mother's traditional views and her expectations for his future, but Emma, accustomed to facing challenges head-on, was hopeful they could win her over. Introducing Emma to his family was a step filled with apprehension. Mrs. Wright, Michael's mother, greeted Emma with a polite yet distant demeanor. Her disapproval was evident, although unspoken, leaving a palpable tension in the air. Emma tried to connect with her, but Mrs. Wright's preconceived notions about Emma's orphan background created an invisible barrier. Despite this, the couple moved forward with their wedding plans, driven by their love and the belief that they could overcome these obstacles. They opted for a small ceremony, understanding that a lavish affair would only amplify the underlying tensions. On their wedding day, the garden setting was a burst of colors, reflecting the optimism of the occasion. Emma's heart was a mix of emotions, joy at marrying the man she loved, and trepidation about the future with his family. After the wedding, Emma's transition into Michael's family home was fraught with challenges. Mrs. Wright's coldness turned into overt hostility, her comments and actions leaving Emma feeling unwelcome and alienated. Michael was torn between his wife and mother, struggling to bridge the growing divide. The strain of living in a hostile environment began to wear on Emma. She had hoped to find a family in Michael's, but the reality was far from her expectations. The constant criticism and lack of support from Michael led her to question the viability of their marriage. Her mother-in-law was unnecessarily critical of her. She would mock Emma and torture her by reminding her of her past. She would point out her bad cooking skills. Finally, realizing her well-being was at stake, Emma decided to leave. The divorce, though painful, was a step towards reclaiming her dignity and self-respect. Emma walked away from a marriage and a situation that threatened to erode her sense of self. The dissolution of her marriage with Michael marked the start of a new, solitary journey for Emma. She sought independence and rented a small apartment, keeping in touch with Mrs. Langley, who had become a guiding light in her life. Soon, she got a job. Her job at a private firm was fulfilling, and her salary was sufficient to provide a comfortable life. However, fate had a surprise in store. Months into her new job, Emma was struck by a wave of grief when Mrs. Langley passed away. Amidst this sorrow, Emma discovered she was pregnant. Bravely facing the challenges of single motherhood, she gave birth to a boy named Adam, a beacon of hope and joy in her life. Emma's life took an unexpected turn when she received a call about a lottery. Mrs. Langley, in a profound act of kindness, had purchased a ticket in Emma's name using her phone number and email address. Astonishingly, the ticket was a winner, bestowing Emma with a considerable fortune. With this newfound financial freedom, Emma contemplated her future. Her thoughts turned to her love for literature and her desire to create something of her own. She used the money to establish her own business, a bookstore and community space for book lovers and aspiring writers. Sometimes life uniquely surprises us, and a similar thing happens to Emma. One day, while shopping at a high-end store for a rare occasion, Emma picked out an exquisite jewelry set. Unknown to her, Mrs. Wright, Michael's mother, was also in the store. Emma's presence took aback Mrs. Wright in such an upscale establishment. Her surprise grew when she saw Emma purchasing the expensive jewelry without a second thought. Curiosity piqued, and Mrs. Wright discreetly followed Emma outside, only to see her getting into a new luxury car. Realizing that Emma's circumstances had dramatically changed was a shock to Mrs. Wright, who had always looked down on her for her humble beginnings. Seeing an opportunity, Mrs. Wright urged Michael to reconnect with Emma, perhaps hoping to mend their fractured relationship and restore the marriage. Influenced by his mother's insistence, Michael approached Emma, hoping for reconciliation. However, Emma had journeyed far beyond the pain and challenges of her past. Her newfound independence and financial security had bolstered her confidence. She politely declined Michael's offer, explaining that their lives had taken different paths and that a reunion was no longer possible. A single divorced mother was standing tall, said goodbye to Michael, and closed the door. Emma focused on her investments and her son. Her bookshop ventures flourished, and she enjoyed creating a warm, stable home for Adam. She transformed into a savvy businesswoman, balancing her career with the responsibilities of motherhood. Emma's heart swelled with pride as she watched Adam grow, surrounded by love and security. She navigated life's storms resiliently, making each obstacle a stepping stone toward a brighter future. Her journey had been unpredictable and often challenging, but it had led her to a place of empowerment and contentment.